Have you ever watched a football match that felt less like a game and more like you're watching a heist where the vault door just won't budge? Well, for decades, if you were playing against an Italian team, that wasn't just a bad day. That was a tactical nightmare, and it had a name, Catenaccio.
You know, in today's game, we're all obsessed with high-pressing, fast-paced, free-flowing attacks. So it's easy to look back at these defensive dark arts and just call them the villain of the story. But is that really fair? Was this just a negative tactic that stifled the game, or was it a brilliant strategic masterpiece?
All right, let's get into it. We're going to break down the history of the lock, from its very beginnings to its most infamous battles, and we'll see how its DNA is, believe it or not, still alive and kicking in the modern game. This is the story of how a perfectly organized defense can shut down even the greatest attacking geniuses in history. So, first things first, what are we actually talking about here? What's the core idea behind this legendary and, let's be honest, notorious system?
Well, the name itself pretty much says it all. Catenaccio literally translates from Italian to the door bolt, and that's exactly what it was. A system built not just to defend, but to completely seal off the goal, to make it absolutely impenetrable. And this right here, this is the core philosophy. It sounds so simple, almost obvious, right? But think about it. At a time when a lot of teams were just trying to outscore each other, the Italians flipped the script. Their logic was kind of revolutionary in its simplicity. A clean sheet guarantees you, at the very least, a draw. End of story.
Okay, so how did they actually pull this off on the pitch? Well, the whole system was basically built on two incredibly effective pillars. First, you had rigid, suffocating man marking. Every single attacker on the other team got their own personal shadow, a defender whose only job for 90 minutes was to follow them, to tackle them, and just generally make their life an absolute misery. But the secret weapon, the real genius of the system, was the libero, the sweeper. This was a free player, sitting just behind the defensive line, acting like a tactical janitor, just cleaning up any loose balls, covering any mistakes. He was the ultimate safety net. Now, when you have a system this rigid, this disciplined, it was basically inevitable that it would have an ideological rival. And boy, did it ever. That rival came from the Netherlands in the form of total football, which set the stage for one of the greatest tactical battles the game has ever seen. And what's so fascinating is how it all boils down to two totally different philosophies. The Dutch, led by the one and only Johan Cruyff, wanted to control space. Their players were fluid, interchangeable, constantly moving to find and exploit open grass. But the Italians? They didn't care about the ball or the space, they cared about controlling the opponent. It was a direct, personal, one-on-one battle. And you can imagine, this clash of styles drove attackers like Cruyff absolutely crazy. He famously complained after these grueling defensive matches, basically arguing that the Italian approach just wasn't what the game was supposed to be about. It was the ultimate battle, the artists versus the pragmatists.
But if you really want to see Catenaccio in its most ruthless, its most physical, and you could argue its most effective form, then you have to go to the 1982 World Cup. This is where the lock wasn't just a tactic, it was practically a weapon.
So Italy has this massive game against Argentina, and they have one simple, but seemingly impossible task: stop a young Diego Maradona. And their solution was just as simple: a man named Claudio Gentile, who was given the simple instruction to not let Maradona out of his sight, for anything.
And this quote from his teammate Marco Tardelli, well, it just perfectly captures the mentality. This wasn't about elegance, it was about doing whatever it took. Gentile fouled Maradona again and again and again, essentially mugging him for 90 minutes. It was brutal, but you know what? It worked.
So yeah, Italy's incredible 1982 World Cup victory was built on this exact foundation: brutally aggressive marking, a heavy dose of mental warfare, and a deep understanding of defensive brilliance. They had this rogue spirit that let them win one of the toughest World Cups in history.
But here's the thing about football. It never stands still. And like any great idea, Catenaccio couldn't stay the same forever. The game changed, new ideas came along, and the lock had to be upgraded. It didn't disappear, not at all. Its defensive DNA was just integrated into a new, more dynamic system.
And you can see this evolution perfectly if you just look at the history of one club, AC Milan. They went from the classic door-bolt Catenaccio under Nerio Rocco in the 60s to a completely revolutionary pressing system under Arrigo Sacchi, all the way to the absolute peak of defensive organization under Fabio Capello.
Sacchi basically tore up the old playbook. He got rid of that rigid man marking. Instead, he brought in an aggressive press where the entire team moved as a single coordinated unit.
They mastered the offside trap, squeezing the pitch, and controlling space in a completely new way. It was a true revolution in defensive thinking. And the result of all this? Well, under Sacchi's successor, Fabio Capello, this new evolved system reached a level of defensive perfection that is, frankly, mind-boggling. In the 1993-94 season, his AC Milan team, with legends like Baresi and Maldini, conceded just 15 goals. 15 in an entire 34-match league season. Just think about that for a second. It's one of the greatest defensive achievements in the history of the sport.
So where does that leave us today? Let's circle back to our original question. After all this evolution, all these battles, what is the real, lasting legacy of Catenaccio?
I think, more than anything else, Catenaccio and all of its descendants taught the entire footballing world a fundamental lesson. Space is a weapon. And not just creating it, but maybe even more importantly, denying it. The tactical genius was in understanding how to compress the pitch and choke an attack before it could even get started.
And you know we rightly celebrate the goal scorers, the creative geniuses. Of course we do. But maybe we should also appreciate this. There's a special, unique kind of beauty in the art of defending, in those players who sacrifice their own glory for the team, who find true joy in a perfectly timed tackle or a crucial interception.
So the next time you see a team grind out a tough, gritty 1-0 win, maybe don't just call it boring. Look a little closer. Look for the organization, the communication, the sheer tactical cunning. Because the complete story of football isn't just about scoring great goals. It's also about the beautiful art of stopping them. Which leaves us with one last question for you. In today's high-octane attack-first game, is the pure defensive mindset of Catenaccio a lost art that we should admire? Or are you just happy that the old door bolt has been replaced by the high press? What do you think?